fantasy football drafts coming up in the next few weeks and the season in a few weeks as well here. But here's a few quarterbacks that I think are going to be busts this season. The first guy is Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans. So right here, a lot of off-the-field issues over the past few months here for Watson. And we don't know if it's going to come true or not, or what's going to happen with him. So right now, with all the uncertainty, he's a player I definitely don't want to draft in my fantasy leagues. We know the upside. We know how good of a fantasy quarterback he's been throughout his career, and especially the last two seasons here is Deshaun Watson. But right now, I think the Texans might try to wash their hands with him as well. And right here, these are serious things, allegedly, that he did here as Watson. So right now, fantasy leagues, he's owned in 52% of leagues right now going into the season. But I'm not going to take a gamble on him. Quarterback's a pretty deep position this season. And who knows if he'll even play this season or even make it through half a season. So right now, Deshaun Watson's definitely a player that's going to be a bust, and definitely a player I'm going to avoid in my fantasy leagues right now. It's not worth it, even with his upside and the playmaking ability at the quarterback position. Houston Texan team, they don't have much around them after the last couple seasons, taking good pieces away here from Watson. And once again this year, it's a lot of unknown guys, a lot of young guys, and just not many playmakers on the offense as well. So right here, let someone else deal with the headache if they want to take a gamble with Watson. But I'm telling people he's going to be a bust, and he's going to be a quarterback I don't want to draft this season. The next guy that's going to be a bust, I think, this season is Baker Mayfield of the Cleveland Browns. So Baker Mayfield, he had a good season last season, no doubt about it, bouncing back after having a bad year 2 years ago. Is Mayfield. Last season, 3,563 yards, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 165 rushing yards, and a touchdown. And he also even had a catch for 6 yards and also 4 fumble losses. So right now, most fantasy leagues, he's going anywhere from the 10th to the 12th round as Baker Mayfield. But I just don't think he's going to have that good of a year once again. Last season, I feel like the Cleveland Browns caught a few teams by surprise here. And this season, their offense is still pretty loaded and pretty stacked with the same players. And Odell Beckham Jr. obviously coming back from a torn ACL, but I just don't see Baker having another good season like this, especially where he only threw 8 interceptions. He's more of a gunslinger. Last season, those balls just weren't as picked off as much. So this season, I think the numbers will be pretty similar. Probably 3,500 yards once again. Probably 25 to 30 touchdowns, but I also could see 10 to 15 interceptions and 4 or 5 fumble losses as well. And like I mentioned, this season, teams are going to try harder. Teams are going to know what to expect versus Baker and this Brown offense. And right now, I just don't see him having a great year. As a backup quarterback, fine, but if you're going to go into the season with Baker Mayfield, your starting quarterback in one quarterback leagues, he's definitely going to be a bust out and be a guy that I don't think has that good as a season like he did last year. And this season as well, it's a pretty tough schedule for the Browns. So right here, Baker Mayfield, he's a guy at quarterback. I think that's going to be a bust. The next quarterback's Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So Stafford, after a decade plus in Detroit, he got traded in the offseason for Jared Goff and draft picks from the Los Angeles Rams here. And Stafford now, he's got a good supporting cast around him. And he's a good quarterback, no doubt about it. But this guy, we know the injury concerns. We know the shoulder injuries as well. And who knows here what he's going to do with his new team. I know they got good weapons. You got Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, Robert Woods, Deshaun Jackson as a deep threat to go over there. Darrell Henderson in the backfield. But I just don't know if Stafford's going to be consistent and stay on the field. And he's been up and down throughout his career. One good year, one bad year. An injured year, healthy year, and last season was a pretty good year for Stafford. 4,084 yards, 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 112 rushing yards on the season, and 2 two-point conversions. So only 11 turnovers on the season with 1 fumble loss was good. And this season, with his new team in the Rams, they're projecting him 4,475 yards and 35 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So those are pretty solid numbers if he puts it up and if he makes a full season here, Stafford. And right now in fantasy leagues, he's going anywhere from the 8th to the 10th round in most drafts. But there's more quarterbacks I like on the board better than Stafford this year. I like guys like Jalen Hurts. I like guys like Justin Fields and Trey Lance if they're going to be starters to start the year. And I definitely like Joe Burrow as well, even coming off an injury, better than Matthew Stafford this year. I might be right, I might be wrong, but I just got a feeling this year with his new team that Matthew Stafford is going to be a bust for fantasy football owners. The next quarterback's Carson Wentz of the Indianapolis Colts. So Carson Wentz, he got traded in the offseason to the Colts, and he's reunited with former offensive coordinator where he had his best years under in Frank Reich, who's the head coach, obviously, for the Colts. And Carson Wentz already in training camp, he got hurt with a foot injury. He went under foot surgery, and right now he's very antsy in his rehab assignments, trying to get back and trying to get ready for Week 1 versus Seattle. But right now that's up in the air, and I just can't trust Carson Wentz. He's been hurt the last 3 seasons at what time of another here throughout those seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles washed their hands with him. They drafted Jalen Hurts last year, and they just gave Wentz up. I believe it was for a 3rd or a 4th rounder this season, and already the trouble that Wentz has had throughout his career with the injuries is happening already. So he's a player, let someone else deal with him. He's going in the later rounds of fantasy leagues or even undrafted in some fantasy leagues, and that's what I'm going to do with Carson Wentz because I think he's going to be a bust. I don't think he's going to be healthy, and it's up in the air if he's even going to be around to start Week 1, already with a foot surgery under his belt with his new team in the Indianapolis Colts. So right now, Carson Wentz, I think, is going to be a bust, and a player I definitely can't trust this season. And the 5th and final quarterback, I think, is going to be a bust in fantasy this year's Matt Ryan of the Atlanta Falcons. So Matty Ice, he lost Julio Jones this offseason in a trade to the Tennessee Titans. And I know he got a couple decent weapons in Mike Davis for the backfield who could catch a lot of passes. And obviously the highly anticipated top 10 pick in the NFL draft, tight end Kyle Pitts. So right here, no Julio Jones. And we'll see if those guys will take his targets and get integrated well into this Falcon offense. But right here, I just can't trust Matt Ryan for whatever reason. Last season, we saw him have some piss-poor games where he scored single-digit fantasy points for a few games in a row. And once again, I think this Falcon team's not going to be very good, and they didn't do much to improve this team. But the only good thing for Matt Ryan is there's going to be a lot of ball games, in my opinion, where they're going to have to throw the football 40, 50 times because they're trailing by a few touchdowns. So on the season, they're projecting 4,100, 25 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 12 intos for Ryan. If he could put those numbers up with no Julio Jones this season, I think those are pretty decent numbers. But last season, 4,581 yards, 26 touchdowns, 11 intos, 92 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns with 3 fumble losses. So Matt Ryan, he's going anywhere as well from the 9th to the 11th round. But right now, I can't trust him without a receiver that he's had throughout his career. And let's be real, he's been a guy, Julio Jones, who catches most of those 50-50 balls that Matt Ryan likes to throw up there down the field as Hail Mary. So right here, I just don't think Ryan has a great season. And I don't think he's going to be good for fantasy. So that's a few quarterbacks that I think are going to be busts here heading into the 2021 fantasy football season and your fantasy drafts in the upcoming weeks.